Damian Lillard to the Milwaukee Bucks. We're going to break down this blockbuster trade from the perspective of all three teams and the teams that did not make the trade for Dame. So, starting off with Milwaukee, they acquired Dame and send out Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen, the 2029 unprotected first round pick, and then swap rights for their 2028 and 2030 first rounders. It's worth noting that the Bucks, they did the same thing when they acquired Drew Holiday a couple years back. And the reason why they acquired Drew Holiday is there were questions about whether or not Giannis was going to stay with the team. Well, this week, Giannis started to make some grumblings in the media about whether or not he was going to sign his extension. He was extension eligible. I think yesterday was the first day he was extension eligible, and they made this trade the day after. Not particularly surprising timing. They want to do everything, of course, to keep the best player in their franchise history, with apologies to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But so it is worth noting that the last time that Milwaukee did all this and they went all in for an all-star to pair with Giannis, they did end up winning the NBA title. And I do think that Dame is a pretty sizable upgrade from Drew Holiday, all things considered. It is going to change the makeup of their team dynamically, but yeah, it does look like the Bucks are the favorites in the East right now. Maybe not in the regular season. You could give that to maybe Boston because they are a little bit younger. But certainly in the playoffs, I really like the matchup that Milwaukee has with Boston. And it's worth Dame. It's worth noting that Dame immediately becomes the best guard in the Eastern Conference. An All NBA first team has not gone to an East guard in over a decade. Believe it or not, the last time that an East guard made All NBA first team was during Derrick Rose's 2011 MVP season. It's been a Western Conference dominated position between Dame, obviously, Curry, CP3, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and now Luka Doncic and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. The only East guard that made the All NBA team this past year was Donovan Mitchell, who made the second team. And I would take Damian Lillard over Donovan Mitchell. Dame made the third team last year in spite of playing for a destitute, is one way of putting it, Portland Trailblazers team. So Dame joining the Milwaukee Bucks, they're probably going to end up with a top 2 or 3 record in the Eastern Conference. Probably makes him a favorite for the All NBA first team, I would say. And the duo itself of Giannis and Dame is pretty comparable to like a Shaq and Kobe. That's one pairing that comes to mind in terms of like Dame is like a top 2 offensive player in the NBA, right there with Steph, and Giannis is like that dominating big man. Who we're gonna get down into their role changes a little bit. How this is gonna have an effect on Giannis, but one other combo that you could compare this to is James Harden and why does this do this? Is Joel Embiid and James Harden. Damian Lillard is a better player than James Harden was when he joined the 76ers a couple years ago. Harden right now is 4 years removed from his Houston level prime. He's not that level of player anymore, whereas Dame really just had maybe the best offensive season of his career. But so let's go and break that down, actually. Dame averaged 32 points per game, which was third in the NBA, 7 assists per game, which was seventh, 36 minutes per game, which was seventh. And looking at their advanced stats, 26.7 PER, player efficiency rating, PER, was 8th in the NBA, 7.1 BPM, box plus minus, which was 10th, 8.3 offensive box plus minus, which was 2nd, 65 true shooting, 19th in the NBA, which was his career high, doing that on 34% usage, which was 5th in the NBA, also a career high. 9.5 free throw attempts per 36 minutes, also a career high, and a 35 assist percentage, which was 10th in the NBA, also a career high. So that's the level of player that of offensive player that the Bucks are adding. Obviously, Dame is nowhere close to Drew Holiday defensively, but we'll get into that. I do think that the offensive output of Dame is really going to outweigh any of the defensive deficiencies that he has, because point guard is the least important position defensively, and the Bucks have Giannis and also Defensive Player of the Year candidate Brook Lopez to kind of shore up the weaknesses. Additionally, looking at some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, there aren't really a ton of. We mentioned prior that there aren't a lot of guards that have made the All NBA first team in the Eastern Conference. Well, if you look at the Boston Celtics, they've got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis. They're very wing dominated. Is Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon, are those guys going to take advantage of Dame offensively? Is James Harden going to be on the Sixers or in the Western Conference? Who are the players that are really going to make Dame pay? Is like Darius Garland going to rip him up in a playoff series with the Giannis Lopez backline? I don't know, and that's why I think this is such a great trade for the team. Breaking down Drew Holiday a little bit, he had a pretty bittersweet time in Milwaukee as he won a title, returned to All-Star status for the first time in 10 years. He was he was all defensive first team last year and made 2 all defensive teams while during his time in Milwaukee. But much like Eric Bledsoe before him, his offense in a playoff series really fell under a microscope. He only shot 40% from the field, 30% from 3, and 75% from the free throw line in the playoffs in his 3 years with Milwaukee, encapsulating 7 playoff series. So that's a lot of series where Drew Holiday's offense really didn't come through. The Milwaukee's playoff success was essentially as far as Giannis Antetokounmpo and the defense could carry them. And if they caught a bad matchup, they might exit the playoffs early, which they did a couple times, including last year against the Heat when they were a first seed and lost to an eighth. So this is, which by the way, I don't think is going to happen again. And we'll get into Miami's what their season's kind of looking like moving forward without Dame. This is also, the Bucks trading for Dame, by the way, is as much to keep him out of Miami's hands as anything, as Miami's kind of been their rival over the last 3 years. They have matched up in the playoffs, a lot, and they have come out the loser in 2 of those occasions. But let's break down some of the role changes that this team is going to have. Giannis, for example, had a 39% usage rate last year. The presence of Dame is going to significantly reduce that. No more Giannis pull-ups and mid-range shots, which were kind of the side effect of him having to keep the defense honest because they were running things through him. He was creating them on the perimeter, etc. All those perimeter possessions are going to Dame now. So Giannis becomes a lot less of a half-court initiator, and he can focus a lot more of his energy on defense and in transition, which, as he gets into his later 20s, that's essential. He can't be the catch-all guy, I think, that he was in his younger 20s. He's going to have to... There is a cap on how much energy he can expend during the regular season and a playoff series. So that's going to be a huge boon to Milwaukee's offense next season. Chris Middleton, he becomes the 3rd option on this team. Previously, he was the 2nd option. It's going to be a huge reduction in the Chris Middleton and Giannis pick and roll game. Given the age and health concerns of Middleton, is probably for the best. He spent most of last season recovering from injury. He didn't really look right until like the last month in the playoffs, so they didn't really get a ton of continuity from him. So from like a 2K's perspective, I can see Middleton dropping to like let's say an 85 overall. By the way, this is my roster, not the 2K roster. I think they have him at 85 overall. I could see him just dropping like 3 points overall to like Bojan Bogdanovic's level, to give you a kind of idea of like not as much. He's not going to be doing as much creating. Going to be much more of a spot up shooter, which should do wonders for his efficiency, and that's probably for the best for him as he is 32, signed for I think the next like 3 years. Yeah, yeah. So Grayson Allen is the other outgoing player in this trade. He hit 40% of his threes in 2 years with Milwaukee, but his defense was never really good enough for a playoff series. They started Wes Matthews over him in the 2022 playoffs, and it's worth noting that they won the title without him in 2021. Back then, they had Dante DiVincenzo, and then when he got hurt, they went to PJ Tucker in the starting lineup after his injury. So it does seem like Milwaukee is going to replace him internally. I think Pat Connaughton makes a lot of sense stepping into that role. It is worth noting that Connaughton slipped hard offensively last season. You note that he's only a 73 overall here. And that's because he had a really ugly shooting line, 39% from the field, 34% from three, 66% from the free throw line. In 2022, that was 46, 40, and 83. So he was much more efficient. It remains to be seen whether or not he can recapture that form. If he's not able to, then it might fall to Marjan Beauchamp, who his shooting line wasn't much better at 40, 33, and 73, but he is 8 years younger. So probably whoever's the best defensive player of the two of these guys will end up starting. Well, best defensive player and most consistent three-point shooter. So I would lean towards Connaughton because he does have a better track record of being a good three-point shooter. But we'll see whether or not he still has it physically. And whichever one of these guys doesn't win the starting job is going to end up being the backup small forward rather than shooting guard. As the backup two guard will be Malik Beasley. Beasley could also become the starter. It's worth noting that's crazy firepower with with him and Dame Lillard. Beasley is definitely an underrated offensive player, I think, given that he took a minimum level contract. But he's always been a 3-point bomber. It's worth noting that the Blazers, didn't have the greatest success with an all-offense backcourt dating back to Dame and CJ McCollum. But certainly them being able to go to certain lineups, especially during the playoffs, where they might need it. I think Beasley is probably the biggest winner from the Grayson Allen trade because now they don't have. He's very clearly the best shooter that they have. And I do think that he will stick in a bench role just because they don't have any other guys on this team who can really score on their bench unit. Bobby Portis is really the only guy, but he's not really a shot creator or anything. Obviously, they can stagger guys. Like Chris Middleton will probably be part of that second unit if they don't go to like all. It's not like in 2K when like they sub out the entire bench unit, the entire starting lineup for an all bench unit. That doesn't really happen in the NBA. But the Bucks with this trade also open up a roster spot, which is good because they have not had a backup point guard the entire offseason. I think we found Cam Payne's new team as he's probably the best available player. George Hill, formerly of the Milwaukee Bucks, they could retain him as a veteran who's familiar with all those guys. But it is worth noting that former coach Mike Budenholzer was one of his biggest fans, and he is no longer with the team. I personally would lean towards Payne, but we'll see. And obviously, one of these other teams could also offer a larger role for Payne, as obviously there isn't going to be a crazy amount of minutes behind Dame Lillard, who averages like 36 minutes per game, and even with the reduction, is probably looking at like 33. Anyway, let's jump on over to the Phoenix Suns, and they received Joseph Nurkic, DeAndre Ayton, Tamani Kamara, Keon Johnson and Grayson Allen in this trade. This was almost essentially there had been reporting in the days leading up to this trade of whatever team was in the Dame sweepstakes. The Ayton Nurkic swap would likely be a component of it. So lo and behold, here we go. It's the end of the DeAndre Ayton era. Phoenix is in win now mode, which is ultimately why they moved on from their former number one overall pick. And they bring in Yusuf Nurkic, who, even if he's a downgrade from Ayton on the court, he's probably a much better fit in the locker room. Given that Ayton had a very divisive relationship with the organization and the coaching staff. Obviously, Ayton butted heads with Monty Williams for a little bit, and the organization played hardball with him during his restricted free agency. So there were a lot of hard feelings, and we'll get a little bit more into that in the Ayton section when we break him down. But as far as like what Nurkic brings the Phoenix Suns, he is a better passer than DeAndre Ayton and a better outside shooter. So he, in theory, should be a better offensive fit. I do think that Ayton is a little bit of a better finisher, which is not saying much because Ayton wasn't a great finisher and he didn't really get to the line very much. But some of that may have had to do with his offensive fit on this iteration of the Phoenix Suns. You know, Ayton's a guy that needs touches, and he just wasn't going to get them on a team with KD, Booker, and Beal. And you'll note that Nurk actually has an 83-point rating. He shot 36% from three last year with the Blazers, hitting 43 threes. So it's been posited that he could be kind of similar to Brook Lopez. However, he's nowhere near the level of player that Brook Lopez is on the defensive end. And he's had a lot of injury issues. Having barely played over the last 4 years, he averaged 38 games played over the last 4 seasons. He missed 30 games last year. DeAndre Ayton, he at least took the court. He actually wasn't the most durable player either, averaging 58 games over the last 4 years. But there's a wide gap between 58 and 38. Like 38 is, a season is 82 games, so half the season's 41. So Nurk is missing literally more than half the season each year on average. And defensively, he's not at 7 foot, 290 pounds. He doesn't have a ton of versatility. Actually, he has zero versatility. And, we mentioned the injuries. The Blazers, previous to Nurkic broke his leg in 2019, and the Blazers, they ranked 16th defensively that year. That was the year that they ended up making the conference finals. Nurk unfortunately wasn't part of that run as he broke his leg a month before the playoffs. But they were never the same defensively after that. They were 28th in defensive efficiency in 2020, 29th in 2021, 30th in 2022, and then 27th in 2023. So, 4 years of being a bottom 3, bottom 5 offense is, not a great track record. He did lose a lot of mobility on the defensive end. Obviously, the Blazers didn't have the greatest defensive personnel around him either. But, I mean, there were a couple, they had Robert Covington for one or two of those seasons. Like, they had some guys. Just, it also didn't help that Nurk was missing half the season, which certainly would affect his his performance and the team's performance, etc. Whereas the Suns, they, over the last 3 years, ranked 2021, they were 9th, 2022, they were 3rd, and 2023, they were 7th. So 3 years of being a top 10 defense. I think it's safe to say that at a minimum, DeAndre Ayton wasn't hurting the team there. And going from Ayton to Nurk might hurt a little bit. It kind of remains to be seen. Worth noting that, kind of hilariously enough, you Nurk is reunited with his former backup, Drew Eubanks, who signed with the Suns on a minimum deal. And Eubanks started 50 games over the last 2 years due to Nurkic's injuries. So he's in a familiar place here. Also means that he's part of those Portland defensive ranks. And, can Phoenix win it all if Eubanks has to play 1,500 to 2,000 minutes in a given season? I don't know. So the other issue that I have with like the Phoenix Suns in this trade is like how many shooting guards are they going to bring in? Grayson Allen is the fifth shooting guard on this team. They're already playing Bradley Beal out of position as like an experimental point guard. They got Damian Lee. Obviously, Devin Booker, who's been with the team since he got drafted. Damian Lee can play some three, but at 6'5", 210, he's really more of a two guard. And what about Eric Gordon? I've got him at point guard because my logic was like he's got the same build as Bradley Beal, and like where else are you going to find room for these guys? Also, the fact that the Suns don't even have like a true point guard on their team. They bring in Keon Johnson, but he may not be long for the team. But we went over. I don't necessarily hate the Grayson Allen thing. He is, if nothing else, he's an upgrade from Landry Shamet, and hilariously, I think makes the same amount of money at 8.9 million or close to it. But like the problem is like what skill set is he really bringing the team that Eric Gordon isn't already at a minimum on a minimum deal. Allen started for 2 years, really 2.5 years, dating back to also his one of his seasons with the Memphis Grizzlies. He was averaging 27 minutes per game on a contender, so he's due for a significant decrease in playing time, barring any injuries, of course. I don't hate him as a player. I think he's appropriately paid Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard makes 15 million. Grayson Allen makes 9. So he is tradable. There might be a team who's interested. Of course, his defense leaving a little to be desired, and his age 28. What teams are really looking to acquire a player like that don't already have other players that's at that position that they're also trying to get rid of. Like we mentioned, Luke Kennard. The Heat have Duncan Robinson, who they're looking to move on from. There's lots of other guys, and you could probably get Reggie Bullock from the Spurs for probably a similar package, and actually get a guard who can defend. But the other guy they get is I didn't mention. Sorry, they also got Nasir Little in this trade. He is a very key piece of the trade. He could end up starting for this team. Very sleeper pickup. Could establish himself as the starter. Josh Okogie hasn't really lit the world on fire. Okogie's definitely the best defensive player on this roster, and he shot the ball well from three during the regular season, and then that fell off, completely disappeared during the playoffs. Keita Bates-Diop is another similar player in that he improved as a three-point shooter last year, but is that going to stick? And I think Nasir Little, if anything, has a more proven track record as a three-point shooter. So as a result, he could be in the mix especially during the playoffs. I don't know if you can start Okogie during a playoff series unless his improvement as a three-point shooter is legit. And it is worth noting that Nasir Little is on a 4-year contract. The extension that he signed with the Portland Trailblazers, he makes about $6 million a year. So he is actually, along with Grayson Allen, one of the few players not on a minimum contract that they could trade. So he could be on the move again, but I don't mind him as like a long-term, like the young guy on this team, kind of like, I don't know. It's like when the Lakers acquired like Trevor Ariza or something. I would kind of liken it to that. And his 3-point shooting and his defense are really going to be what determines his role on this team moving forward. So who gets cut? The Suns are now two over the roster limit. They've got two guys on non-guaranteed deals in Jordan Goodwin and Ish Wainwright. I would say Goodwin's probably a safe bet to make the roster. He's one of the few point guards on the team, and he's better than Keon Johnson. Wainwright has been on a non-guarantee for he's always back and forth between a standard contract and a two-way. The Suns don't have a third guy on a two-way, so I think Wainwright could end up on a two-way if he wants to stay with the organization. If there's another team that's willing to give him a shot, maybe not. He is very old for a two-way player at 29 years old, and would probably prefer to make some actual money in his professional career at some point. He's really hoping to stick on a standard contract. I think that Keon Johnson's probably the odd man out for sure. If nothing else, he's a safe bet to have his fourth-year team option declined on his rookie scale contract. That was worth $4.7 million, and he would be a minimum salary guy if he got waived today, and he really hasn't shown much in 2 years. Still only 21. Also worth noting that he is the youngest player on this team by a wide margin. And the Suns are not looking around. They're not in player development mode. They are very much in win now mode. So I would say Keon Johnson's probably on the outside looking in, and possibly I think Chimezie Metu and Bol Bol are two guys who are on the chopping block. Where is Bol Bol? 76 overall, Metu 75. Because these are the two guys on veteran minimum contracts who did not get a player option. So that's why they're not going to cut Yuta Watanabe, Eric Gordon, Diab, Okogie, etc. Or Eubanks. Those guys all got player options. Or Eric Gordon. That's a lot of guys who got player options on their vet minimum deals. Metu and Bol Bol are the two who did not. They both play the same position. And I don't know. I like Bol Bol a lot. I kind of feel like the Suns are not in that type of mode. Like they're not here to F around and find out. KD's 35, and Bol Bol is just like a little too much of a curio. I think for a team that is trips all in, they're not going to have time to really develop him. And I got him listed at power forward. I think because originally I had Bates Diop as a small forward rotationally on this team, but the addition of Little is essentially and Lee also needing time as well. That's going to push Bates Diop to the 4, backing up KD along with Yuta Watanabe, and then I think Bol Bol, if he wants to see any time, it's going to have to be at the 5, which he's kind of shied away from playing due to his frame. I do think that he has, Chet Holmgren, Poku, etc. Like he can play some 5. You don't need to be as bulky anymore to do it. But are the Phoenix Suns gonna have a role for him? Maybe they need all hands on deck because Nurkic is that injury prone, so that they would carry 4 centers on the roster. In which case, they cut Keon Johnson and Wainwright. Those are the two that I would lean towards them cutting, especially if Wainwright is willing to stay on a 2-way deal. But all right, and enough talking about the end of the bench. Let's look at the Portland Trailblazers, who certainly their roster definitely resembles the end of the bench. They acquired Drew Holiday for Dame Lillard. They acquired in Drew Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, Tamani Kamara, the first-round pick and 2 pick swaps from the Milwaukee Bucks, and then out are Dame Lillard, Jusuf Nurkic, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. So the big question that I now have is Scoot Henderson going to start? Drew Holiday may not have the Portland ties that Dame does, but he is an all-star and all-defensive first-team player Like he's not coming off the bench behind Scoot. I think that they definitely need to trade him before the season starts. To be fair to both, not just the player, but like the locker room, because guys in that locker room are going to be looking at Drew Holiday like, you know, why is this guy starting? Or why is this guy not starting? You know, NBA players want to win games. Nobody wants to be quote unquote tanking. I do think that Drew Holiday is a consummate professional. He was teammate of the year the last 2 years, or and like 3 out of the last 4. So, you know, would he come off the bench behind Scoot Henderson? Maybe, but like, I just wouldn't want to put him in that position. Um, it is worth noting that Drew is easier to trade than Dame, both functionally and emotionally. He makes a little under 30 million, which is not a far cry from 55 or 60 million or whatever Dame makes. So, and it is worth noting that like you can actually play Drew and Henderson together due to Drew's defensive prowess. You know, he has a bigger point guard, 6'5", 205. Has probably the strongest point guard in the NBA. And you know, if Drew were to play for Portland, I personally would actually start Drew over Anthony Simons. But that's because I'm much lower on Anthony Simons than Portland appears to be. But as far as Scoot, like he essentially has a clearer path now for Rookie of the Year. Um, you know, the day because we don't Drew Holiday's not going to end this team the year on this team. He may not end the month on this team. Um, and if he's got a clear path for minutes, then he's going to be competing with Victor Wembanyama for Rookie of the Year. And that should be one of the best Rookie of the Year races that we've seen in a very long time. Really, the last compelling Rookie of the Year race that we had was LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, which all of 20 years ago. Prior to that, Jason Kidd and Grant Hill, which I think they were co-Rookie of the Years. Um, and worth noting that Big Dog Glenn Robinson was also in on that Rookie of the Year race as well. But aside from that, a lot of the Rookie of the Year races are usually pretty lopsided. So I am excited to watch those two young guys battle it out for that award this year. And so they got Drew Holiday, who, you know, debatable. We'll see what the Blazers are going to get for him. Really, the biggest basketball addition for the team is DeAndre Ayton. It's a fresh start for DeAndre Ayton, who was drafted #1 overall by the Phoenix Suns. He started off his career essentially as the #2 option with Devin Booker, but then Phoenix, you know, they acquired Chris Paul and they shifted from rebuilding straight into contending a lot sooner than anyone expected. If you recall, during the bubble, when they signed Ricky Rubio, like the bubble Suns went like 8-0, and people realized, oh wait, this team might actually be good. Devin Booker's good, and they like immediately transitioned into being a contender once they traded for Chris Paul, and they won 64 games the year after that. And then they acquired Kevin Durant, and then they acquired Bradley Beal, and just going all in on, you know, they have all these offensive players who essentially superseded Ayton, and his offensive role more or less diminished every year, despite being a #1 overall pick. And they were asking him to focus more on his defense, which is not necessarily the reason why he was drafted. And that made his defensive weaknesses get magnified because he's a solid defensive player, but he's not the all defensive level player that they would need him to be in order to you know, be contending for titles. He's you know, the guys who get drafted #1 overall are not necessarily little things guys a lot of the time. You know, those are usually the role players who are going late in the first round or in the second round. So worth noting that you know, Ayton, he was still getting 4.7 post touches per 36 minutes with the Phoenix Suns. He had to scratch and claw for every single one of those. You know, really debatable on whether or not that was a great option, given that they had Booker and KD, etc. But you know, the guy's got to eat. And Yusuf Nurkic, he was getting 6.1 post touches per 36 with the Portland Trailblazers. That was fourth in the NBA. So that's another issue of like how is Nurk going to fit on the Phoenix Suns, because he's essentially getting the same shot diet that Ayton was. Um, so Aiton's going to at the very least, fit into Nurkic's offensive role pretty seamlessly and probably be better at it. As mentioned, he's younger and healthier than Nurk, 25 instead of 29, so he fits the timeline. And speaking of the timeline, those unprotected first round pick is for the 2029 season, 5 years from now. So it's going to be Giannis's age 35 season and Dame's age 38 season. So the Bucks most likely will not be contenders anymore. Who knows what phase of like Dame's career he'll be at that point, or if he's even still on the team. Who knows what Giannis will look like 5 years from now, and also if he's still on the team. So they, along with those pick swaps, the Blazers could be getting like three potentially high-ish lottery picks for 3 consecutive years. Right when Scoot turns 24 years old and his prime is starting to take off, they might be able to add some lottery picks. Whether or not they draft somebody or trade those picks for like additional players, they're going to have that option. And I think Ayton fits that timeline, as he'll be 30. He'll be, I believe, extension eligible at that point. And whether or not this his tenure with the Blazers really worked out, he might be somebody that they look to keep along for the next like 3 or 4 years beyond that. So I think this is a really great landing spot for him. And speaking of timelines, again, Jeremy Grant is probably, along with Drew Holiday, he's the next one out the door. Age 29, he got his contract, his free agency contract, as a way to like keep Dame happy. Kind of, he was, I guess, the biggest winner in free agency, because they definitely overpaid a little bit in order to keep him. But he's not like overpaid in a way that makes him untradeable. So the Blazers keep the asset, and they're going to be able to squeeze like a first round pick out of a team for him. So between him and Holiday, the Blazers have like 60 million in salary that they're going to be looking to move and get bad contracts back for, along with draft picks. And there ain't much left on this team. They did send out a lot. They actually have 2 open roster spots, so they can sign a couple players. I guess briefly touching on the third guy that they got back on this trade, Toumani Camara was drafted 52nd overall by the Suns. He's really just organizational depth. His game doesn't really differ very much from Jabari Walker. I suppose at 6'7", 200, you could probably classify Walker as a 3. As with the Blazers sending out Nasir Little, Kevin Knox is now the backup 3 on this team. Maybe he can salvage his career finally, as he's going to have a clear path for minutes. Although it just kind of reminds me of his rookie year with that dreadful Knicks team, like and then the couple years that he was with the Pistons. He's just the Blazers are going to have a lot of stat padding guys that. This is like the perfect Kelly Oubre team. Kelly Oubre could come in and average 20 points per game. He should have waited a week rather than sign with the Sixers. This was his team, man. He could have averaged 30 or something. But I digress. Shaden Sharp is also going to have a bigger opportunity with Dame gone, and because we don't expect. Who knows what they're getting back for Drew Holiday, but it's probably not going to be a comparable level player, which means that Anthony Simons is going to see a lot more minutes at the 1, which means that Shaden Sharp's going to see a lot more minutes at the 2, so he's a big breakout candidate. And Chris Murray as well. Once Jeremy Grant gets traded, he'll probably enter the starting lineup. So Portland's all in on the youth movement. And as far as free agent options, Kennedy Chandler, Justin Minaya, Justice Winslow, Hamidou Diallo, Anthony Lamb are some of their options. The tank is on, baby. But let's now check out the Heat and some of the other teams that were not able to trade for Dame. The Miami Heat made a move today that was not trading for Dame Lillard. It was signing R.J. Hampton to a two-way contract, not the guard that they wanted to bring in. Like, what do they do now? Like, here's part of the problem is the Blazers turned down the Tyler Hero package, right, for Dame, and Drew Holiday would make a ton of sense for the Heat, but the Blazers already turned down Tyler Hero in the various Dame packages and said that they weren't interested. So like, you kind of like go back to the drawing board with that. Maybe they can find a third team to revert Hero. Maybe their offer for their best quote unquote offer for Dame is like good enough for the Blazers for Holiday, but not great. And you literally have nobody else at point guard. They have Kyle Lowry, who's 37 years old and the only guy that they have at point guard on the team. Like, what are we doing? Maybe this is actually the campaign team because he's got to have such a huge opportunity relative to like Milwaukee or whatever. Do the Heat now like move on to James Harden on the Philadelphia 76ers? I can't imagine that Harden's party lifestyle, let's put it politely, is an ideal fit for Heat culture. Certainly not the condition also that Harden keeps himself in during a season. But maybe the Heat are going to be desperate from losing out on Dame. And maybe the Sixers like Tyler Hero, and we can get like a 3-team swap involved. We'll see. As far as the Sixers, though, the Dame acquisition by the Bucks probably means that they should definitely move on a little faster from the Embiid and Harden pairing. As I mentioned before, Giannis and Dame are a better duo than Embiid and Harden, and that goes for a playoff series. I'm not sure. Like the problem that Harden's had, along with being like not having to wait for the Dame situation to resolve itself, is like there's not really actually any suitors for him that make a lot of sense. He's burned a lot of bridges in his career. There's no chance of like no tanking teams are going to be looking to pick him up or anything. He is 34 years old. I never even thought that the Clippers made sense as a destination, so I understand why they're not making like a good offer or anything. Because if we look at the Clippers, like they have Westbrook at the 1. So what are we doing? We're putting Harden at the 2, Paul George at the 3, and Kawhi Leonard at the 4. I guess like Kawhi Leonard, who struggles to stay healthy, and then you're sending back Marcus Morris, and I don't know. The team at that point is just too old for me. It's a lot of guys who are in their upper 30s, who all need the ball to some degree to contribute. So I don't know. Maybe Harden makes sense on another team that got involved in the Dame sweepstakes late, the Toronto Raptors. Does Harden make sense here? Part of the issue with the Raptors offer is that they didn't want to part with Scotty Barnes. They still need to replace Fred VanVleet. I'm sorry that Dennis Schroeder is not a starting point guard. Surely OG Anunoby would be on the move in such a trade. I'm sure Philly would love to have Anunoby. I'm sure Daryl Morey's a big fan of him. So, but we'll see. Because also, again, I'd be willing to offer OG Anunoby for Dame Lillard. Maybe not so for James Harden. I don't know where. I don't know where the heads of these GMs are at, but I think we're going to get all these questions answered for us in the coming week. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Are the Bucks the championship favorites? What's the ceiling for that team? Where's Harden going? Where's Drew Holiday going? What are the Heat going to do now? Let me know. If you like this video, feel free to like the video, subscribe so that you don't miss any NBA 2K roster content. I am going to update all the I'm not going to say I'm going to update all the players in the trade. Sorry, Tamani Kamara, but I will give rating and badge updates in the coming days for Dame Lillard, etc., so that players can, so that 2K players can use those guys in my roster, the real 2K roster. And you can get all of the data that I use for my roster on patreon.com/real2krosters this year. Feel free to DM me on Twitter for more details on that. Otherwise, enjoy the coming NBA season. Wow, what a day. Bye.